as Danielle said, I'm the head of research and development at Dicta, the Israel Center for Text Analysis, and we've been at this for about 7 years now. Dicta was founded in 2015 with the goal of bridging the gap between cutting edge computer science and natural language processing algorithms on the one hand, and on the other hand, humanities research, and specifically Jewish studies research. And the idea was that Jewish studies research was proceeding according to traditional methods for the most part, and there was an opportunity. There was so much coming out of the world of natural language processing at the time. But in order for researchers to leverage that, there were so many steps that needed to be taken. There were so many gaps that needed to be bridged. So, for instance, anytime there's a cutting edge algorithm in computer science, there's quite a distance from the publication of an algorithm to getting it to the point where it can be used practically. Because it's one thing to have an algorithm that provides results on a theoretical test set, and another that where it works on actual real world data. That's one problem. Another challenge is that the algorithms were almost all being written for English or Latin languages, and very little work was being done in the space of Hebrew natural language processing, largely because it's not commercially viable. So there was very little done in terms of foundational work on Hebrew natural language processing, and in terms of Jewish studies research and the texts that we deal with, especially medieval text or halachic texts and so on, there was almost nothing available to allow a standard NLP algorithm to be applied to the type of texts we deal with in Jewish studies research. And finally, by the way, let me know if my internet, if my speech goes out, and if I should repeat anything, because I know the connection can be a little low. So finally, the last thing where we set our goals at Dicta was to bridge the gap between a program that might be a program that could theoretically be run by a programmer who was running in a command line environment or in Linux and so on, and to bridge the gap between that and a Jewish studies researcher who is sitting at a desk with a Windows computer and who needs a user-friendly interface in order to do anything useful with those texts. And so that's the user-friendly front end and creating mechanisms for a researcher without any prior knowledge of computer programming to be able to leverage these advanced algorithms that were coming out of the computer science side of things. So that's what we set our goals to be 7 years ago, and I hope I'll be able to show you today that we've accomplished quite a bit in all three of those areas, bridging the gap in all of those ways. So I'm going to start by introducing you to our website. All the tools, I'm going to go in the talk today, I'm going to mention a whole series of tools that we've developed, all to fill these gaps that I mentioned. All of the tools are available from our homepage. So I'll put the URL in there. It's dicta.org.il. I wrote it as a direct message to Danielle, so let's write that again as a message to everybody. Okay, that's the URL, and I'll demonstrate that now. Okay, so here we are in Chrome. Here we are on the Dicta site coming up now. Okay. So there's over a dozen tools here that we've developed, and I'm going to focus in on about half of them, which I think are useful for Jewish studies research. And even though, and I should emphasize, all of these tools are under active development. So you're all invited to try out these tools as we go along or afterward. And any items, any issues you find, any bugs you find, or any features that you would prefer to have, please let me know. Because we do have a staff actively developing, fixing, and augmenting all of these tools. Okay, I'd like to start with the question of approximate matching. Or I should present it differently. I'm gonna launch the tool here called Parallel Finder, and Parallel Finder is actually takes on two computer science challenges. One is the challenge of approximate matching, that when we search for something, the item we're searching for isn't always going to be exactly as we write it. There might be changes in orthography, in vavs and yuds. There might be extra words added. There might be synonyms that are replaced. That's the approximate matching challenge. And the other challenge is the all against all challenge. So what does all against all mean? Well, I think for decades, what we've been used to in the world of electronic databases are databases like let me see. It's going to the responsive database, which right. Okay. So I assume most of us are familiar with the Bar-Ilan responsive database. And the way it starts is with the search screen, right? We put up the search screen, we put in the terms we want to search for, and then we see if those terms occur in the corpus. What our tool allows you to do is not to start with a search string, but to take a full text and put it in, and to ask the computer, where are the interesting search strings there? To put it another way, if I have a large text and I want to know which items in that text appear in previous sources, I would have to go through every line of the text and search for each line. And that's kind of silly, because that's a job for a computer, except that until now, that hasn't been an option in electronic databases. So our databases always asked the user to type in specific search terms. So here's the first place where we've put up a tool to allow you to do this automatically. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a sample text. This is the first 7 chapters of Agnon's Oreach Natalalun book, A Guest for the Night. I'm just going to paste the entire thing in here. Okay, so that's about 10,000 words of text. And what I'm asking, what the utility allows me to do is to look for parallels. So I'm asking the utility to find all cases in this text where Agnon is reusing a passage from a previous text. And what this tool does is that it compares it to the entirety of, right now, to the entirety of the Sfariel library, which includes over 100 million words of Hebrew text from medieval times and post-medieval times, from Chazal and so on. This is that's the base library. We expect to expand it over the next year, probably to double it in size, with some internal efforts that we're working on. But right now, the search is vis-a-vis what is available in Sfariel, and what the benefit, the added value here is that instead of asking it, and it's here, Agnon starts with the words Erev Yom Kippurim Char Chatzot. So we might wonder, is that a reference to something in the Mishnah? And we would search that. And then his next phrase, Yatzati min harakevet hameira. So we might search that. But when I click Find Parallels, what the system will do is to automatically search everything all at once against everything in Saria. So that's the all against all. So here I've clicked the Find Parallels button. While it runs, it takes well, here it's already done. So, okay, so let's take a look at what it found. My text is on the right, my input text, and on the left we see the results. So I'll click on the first one to bring me to the text. Now it brought me about a quarter of the way down. So I never would have known to search for this, but a quarter of the way down we see Agnon says the following: Amar Bach, that's one of the characters, and Daniel Bach is one of the characters in Agnon's story here, that is familiar. He says, Adam Kalani, Veini Ma'amin, B'kochas Shel Tshuva. Amarti lo, the narrator, it's Agnon's narrator voice here, says back, Tshuva v'yom kippurim mechaprim mechta, v'yisurim b'shar yemot hashana mechaprim mechta. Amar Daniel Bach, v'amarti lo. So you see, there's a dialogue going on here in the story between the narrator and this other guy named Bach, and he says, Adam Kalani. And the narrator says back, well, Tshuva and Yom Kippurim together give half a kapara, and the Yisurin, the suffering is the other. The rest of the days is the other half of the kapara. And Bach says something back. So there's a dialogue going on. But what this tool tells me here, if you notice here, it highlighted these words, Tshuva v'Yom Kippurim mechaprin, and on the left, I see that that's actually a quote right out of the Tosefta. So Agnon sort of slipped in this Tosefta quote as part of a natural dialogue between characters in his story. I had read the story before. I didn't even notice that was a quote of the Tosefta until today, until I started preparing for this lecture and did this experiment. And here what? Here's another case, number 2. Agnon says, "Kevan shegia lachroz, kol ir al tila benuya," etc. So he's describing a scene in the shul, and he has these words, "Kol ir al tila benuya ve'ir al kim ushpelet," and Agnon doesn't. He does say lachroz. He does indicate that this is something poetic, but he doesn't tell us where it's from or what's going in. He just says they're saying this in the shul, in the synagogue. And on the left, what we see right away is that this is actually from a Sephardi Sidur, from a prayer book with the Slichot L'Sheni Bata. So this line is from the Slicha poems for the Monday sequence. So again, a passage that Agnon just puts in along the way without noting where it's from, and we have it right here. And here, there's a third one here. Okay. We have a third one. This one also is fabulous because it's so subtle in the text. Agnon says, "Devar acher, mishe paska avat habriot, paska avat habachurim ve'abetula." He's talking about the question of the singles mating with one another. Says, "Achshav adam pogea isha bashuk, im matza hu v'hi machnisa letoch beitam, ad shelo nechnasa avatam b'libam katzu ze bazeh." So he has this cynical take on how men and women meet one another. But that phrase, it seems like Agnon is just telling it like it is, Adam pogea isha bashuk, etc. Turns out that phrase comes straight from Haktav VaKabbalah, which is a book that Agnon certainly knew, and in Agnon's in the works where he collects sources, he cites it by name, so he clearly is aware of this book, and turns out that phrase sort of made its way from this 19th century book right into Agnon's story as a natural part of his writing. Okay, so those are the three items that it found in our text, and And by the way, this last one is good to highlight the approximate matching here, because it's might be hard to see, and I'll show you how to see it better. But these two quotes are not exactly the same, and there's a synopsis button here by each parallel to see them lined up word for word. So if I press View Synopsis, I see the Agnon's phrase up on top from my input text, and then the other two. So the other two have this extra word here. That's what's highlighted in blue. In the K'tav Kabbalah, it says Imratzahu v'hi lihinasei machnisa letoch beito. And there's a verb here to get married, and there's a second parallel in Kirat Sefer, which also has a word there, Lisa'ena, and Agnon just skips that word altogether. He just says Imratzahu v'hi machnisa letoch beito, and that's the classic Agnon reading the words of the Achronim and realizing that it would actually sound more eloquent if it was a little simpler, because not every word needs to be said. So classic type of thing for Agnon to do. Chaim Stern wrote his doctorate on Agnon's techniques in rewriting the words of the Achronim. But the point is, for our purposes, that the quote doesn't need to be a word-for-word quote in order for this tool to find it. So that's where the approximate matching comes in. The whole word is skipped here, but that's okay. So the main takeaway here is that I had a text of 10,000 words, and within that text, there were three very striking quotes from known sources that Agnon sort of slipped in there. One from the Tosefta, one from an early source, one from Tav Kabbalah source just a century before Agnon wrote, and another one from the Sidur. And how would we, if we didn't have an all against all tool, how would we ever have come across these three sources? Because they're like needles in a haystack. Because most lines of Agnon are not taken from something earlier. And what this tool does is it searches through the entire thing for us, identifies the places that have parallels, and then brings them all to the fore. This tool looks for whole passages that are reused. We have a parallel tool, or what we call our citation finder or our pasuk finder, which looks for biblical allusions. Which is, some of you may have heard me present that at the Luxembourg conference about 1 year ago. But I'll display it quickly. And this tool, the citation finder, complements what I showed you just now. It also is an approximate matching tool. It also is an all against all. But the difference is that instead of looking for for chunks that are quoted across from anywhere in rabbinic literature, it's very specifically honed to the biblical text, because the biblical text is used in very flexible ways in later writing, and what this tool does is it looks for very subtle reuse of biblical words in almost without any actual quotes. If it's just presented as a hint or as, well, here, let me demonstrate. Here I entered in 3 paragraphs from Agnon's story, B'dmi Yamecha, and I clicked on Find Citations. By the way, if any of you have texts that you're working on now, feel free to send them to me by the chat, and I'll run them right here live on the tools, but you shouldn't think it's a canned demo. I'm happy to run any text that you might have. So let me see. So okay. So here we have the text on the right as before, and the allusions on the left. And this time we're talking about. Well, here I'll highlight the biblical allusions. Well, the first is actually an extensive quote, not an allusion. But look at the second one. Agnon uses the phrase "V'gam avi lo hikdish et kruav." He didn't invite any guests. And this is a phrase from Tefania. It's not a normal Hebrew phrase. It's a phrase he's picking up from this biblical verse. And of course, notice it's only 2 words long. And Agnon sticks another word in the middle. He sticks in the word et. It's a very subtle thing to find. And that's the purpose of this tool, to zero in on these little hints towards biblical psukim. Look at this one in number 4. Agnon wrote, Dicta la'aretz chayaha. He's talking about the character's disease, that it was so debilitating that Dicta la'aretz chayaha. It brought her down to the ground, and it drove her into the ground. And the tool notes that this is based on a verse in Tehillim, Dika la'aretz chayati. But of course, Dika is masculine, and Dika in Agnon is feminine. And chayati is first person, and chayaha is third person. But even though Agnon's reconfigured 2 out of 3 words in this phrase, the tool picks it up and highlights it. And I'll mention one more. Number 5, Agnon writes, "Midekayit shlachua rofeim l'mayanot hayeshua." These well springs of salvation, these springs where she was supposed to heal from. And that, of course, is a reference to Isaiah, Mimayinei HaYeshua. But notice there are only 2 words here, and the word Mayinei, it's not just that it's been conjugated differently. It's Agnon picked up on the feminine sounding form, because Mayan can go to Mayinei or Mayanot in the construct form. And Agnon sort of normalized that to the modern Hebrew Mayanot instead of Mayinei. But the tool still picks it up, because that's what the tool is programmed to do, to get to the base lexemes of each word and then see where those the combinations of lexemes being used in the input text are referring back to something specific in the Bible. Okay, so these were 2 tools that both take a large text as input and automatically do all the searching for you, identifying all the matches and showing them to you on the left. Now, very significantly, both of these tools have a slider in the corner. So here's the precision slider from low to high, and in this tool also we have a precision slider. So I want to talk about those for a minute, because I think that's a very important feature, both here and in general, methodologically, for any tool that's targeting scholars and researchers. Whenever an artificial intelligence algorithm is employed in research, what we're doing is we're relying on an algorithm that's not 100%. These computerized algorithms are precisely because it's artificial intelligence, because they're doing something more intelligent than simply searching for the single input word. Because there's a judgment call going on. That's what makes them intelligent. The computer is making a call on these difficult issues. Like in this case, the computer is making a call on which 2-word phrases in the Tanakh are the ones that are being alluded to. Because obviously not every 2-word phrase is a phrase that we'd want to see. As an example, here, in this very same paragraph, Agnon uses the words ki amra, ki en manoach. Now, the phrase ki amra ki, those 3 words, is a phrase that occurs in Tanakh only one time. So is Agnon referring to that ki amra ki? Well, I think intuitively we all say no, because ki amra ki, those are very simple words. Agnon is just using regular language. But on the other hand, something like Ma'inei HaYeshua is a marked phrase. But how do we determine what's a marked phrase, what's an allusion, and what's not? Well, that's something that always required human judgment. In this case, I programmed this algorithm to make that call based on a complex set of scoring mechanisms. But in this case, and in every case of artificial intelligence applied to a large text, there, the programmer or the site has to the programmer has to set a threshold at a certain point to determine, because the results from an artificial intelligence algorithm, the results from a neural network will always be a percentage. The neural network doesn't tell us yes or no. It tells us 50% or 60% or 70% or 99%. And which results do we want to see? Well, here's something to consider. The needs of scholars are usually at odds with the direction that the programmers and the websites are going. Why? Because as scholars, we want to receive the maximal amount of results. And I think as scholars, we want to make sure that we're not missing any important results. So we'd rather have more false positives. We'd rather have results that may not be relevant and we have to sift through them, rather than having good results that don't appear on the screen at all. Because as scholars, we have to trust that we're getting the information that we're looking for. There can't be information that's just not there. But a computer programmer on the other side, a computer programmer wants to give off a good impression, and a website which aims for high precision but low recall, meaning a website which aims to give you the results that are clearly good results hedging on the side of caution by not showing results that are questionable, that are uncertain, that will look much better for the website. It'll look much better for the company that's providing the search results, because as a user, you don't see what you're missing, but if you see false positives, then that sort of sticks out and makes you feel like the program doesn't know what it's doing. If there are results that just aren't shown, the user usually won't be aware of that. So programmers tend to choose a higher threshold than the scholars need. And I think that the solution has to be to give the control back to the scholars, to give us control as users, to decide where the threshold should be. A threshold for an algorithm should not be decided by the programmer. The programmer doesn't know what we as scholars need. We know what we need, and that's what these sliders do. So what happens here with the precision is, if I move it higher, then I'm going to receive only the results that are very clearly like lots of words bunched up together. And notice I no longer receive the Ma'anei HaYeshua or the Hikdish Kurav. On the other hand, if I move it lower, I'm going to get a whole bunch of additional ones. So in addition to the Dicta Chayati and Ma'anei Yeshua, I now get Midei Shana B'Shana. Now, that's kind of a normal phrase in Hebrew. I don't know if that's specifically a biblical phrase, but it's borderline. So by moving the slider down, we're saying to the computer, we want to get the ones that are more questionable, that are more uncertain. And that's what this lets you do. So let's see, as I move it down, okay. Yeah, so like now we also have he and may. Let me move it a little more down. All right, it's not giving me that much more. But okay, but as you see, it added in it added in like Kol Yemei Chayai V'Shavti Bebeit, which is not exactly a match. But the idea is we get to decide. If we want to, if we have a long text and we want to quickly get to many of the citations, then we can put it in the middle and quickly receive quality results. But if we have a passage and we really want to make sure we get to the bottom of that small passage that we're looking for, then we'll put it to the lowest precision so that we can see everything. Now, the same thing with the parallels here. We saw 3 parallels here from this Agnon text. But if I put it down, Let's see. Oops. Okay, so now all of a sudden, instead of 3, we have 22. Let's see what some of those other ones are. Okay, so here's one. Agnon says, Anu Yodim, Im Hu Chai, probably Ein Anu Yodim, right? Agnon says, Ein Anu Yodim, Im Hu Chai, Ve'im Hu Meit. We don't know if he's dead or alive. And the program cites a Mishnah in or a Gemara here in Masechet Nida, which says "Ve'ino yodeh im chayim meitu lemachar ishkim." So it's a Gemara that's wondering about whether someone is dead, is also is alive or not. Is that a passage that Agnon's quoting? Probably not, right? But by making the slider lower, it gives us a chance to inspect all these iffy type of results. And some of them might actually be relevant. So again, we at Dicta we chose a threshold which we believe to be optimal, but we give you the option of playing with the threshold, so that you can adjust the precision recall balance as relevant for your studies. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. But I just want to see a number of people sent comments. Right, Sasha Stern mentioned that's the Amitai bomb, right? Pogeisha, Rambam. The Pogeisha is straight from the Rambam, not from the Ketav Kabbalah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so that's an interesting point. Yeah. Very good. Okay. In terms of the input text, I'll just say one more thing about the size of the input text. These we let you put in this site. You can input a text of something like 10,000 words, but sometimes, of course, scholars will be processing a whole corpus, and the website can't easily handle a huge corpus on the spot, but we're happy to take any requests like that and process them overnight. So someone actually contacted me last week. He had a corpus of 200 million words of Hebrew text, and he wanted to process it through the Pasuk Finder here. And I did that, and I processed it overnight on one of our servers, and then sent back the full results. So we're definitely happy to do that. If you any corpora that you need processed in mass, just feel free to contact me, and we can do the processing offline. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about. So that's it for approximate matching. Unless there are any questions about it. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about disambiguation of the Hebrew text. The a second focus of our research at Dicta, beyond approximate matching, has been disambiguation of Hebrew. The Hebrew text as it's written in our databases, in our books, and so on, is unvocalized, and that means that most words are actually ambiguous. The most problematic word is aleph taf, right? Is it at or is it et? Right, and that's at is the second most. Aleph taf is the second most common word in our entire language, and it's inherently ambiguous. Where about more than 95% of the time it's going to be et, but probably 99% actually, but 1% of the time it's going to be at, and we don't want to miss those. So how do we deal with that? Well, at Dicta we've built models, neural network-based models, to disambiguate Hebrew text, disambiguate the ambiguous words within Hebrew text based on the context. So the product I open here is called the Nakdan Mahir, the quick Nakdan, and There's a link off our website to it. I encourage you all to try this tool. This tool vocalizes text as you type. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to type a sentence, and I'm just typing Hebrew letters, and the nikud will be placed in as I type. So watch. I'm typing "Rachashti et hatochna," and I bought the software, and you see it put in the et. Now, if I write "Sha'alti ota madua at atzuva," right? I asked her why she's sick. So here it got the at, right? So in both cases, there's an aleph taf, but it vocalized them differently. And the sentences could be very similar, and the program will pick up on the subtleties. So if I write et adeha leveit hasefer, so her steps to the Beit HaSefer. But if I say aleph taf to edet the Beit HaSefer, then it should be at, right? So if I say aleph taf to edet the Beit HaSefer, so now we have at to edet, right? And the idea is that as I typed, the algorithm decided for every aleph taf whether it should be et or at, and for that matter, it decided for lamed bet yud taf if it should be leveit or labayit. For the last word on the line, if it should be hasefer or hasapar. These are all decisions that are being made by the neural network in real time as you type into the site. So first of all, this site is useful for any time you need to use vocalized words. If you're a teacher, you're preparing preparing passages to show on a screen or on a PowerPoint or on a worksheet or a test, you can get an instant vocalization from this tool. But let's go another step further. This tool is it's tuned for modern Hebrew. So if we take a piece here, I have a piece from the Torah Tamima here, and I'm going to put it in. Okay, here's I'll show it to you first here in my editor. Here's my piece from the Torah Tamima, right? Umeshani da'ashmeina da'afal piken ein hamishkav shelo metame ala ochlin umashken. Okay, how's this going to do in the Dicta site? Well, not so well, right? Because the first word is Aramaic, umishani, but it does umishne. And then we have the ashmi'inan, okay, but then, and then mishkav shelo metame ela. So for ochlin umashkin, it did ocholin umishakayin. Why? Because ochlin with a nun sofit at the end and mashkin with a nun sofit at the end are not Hebrew words. Those are rabbinic words with the mem nun switch, and so on. But so how do we deal with that? Well, for that we have a separate product called the Nakdan Pro, and even though it's called Pro, it's completely free. It just means it's the more advanced version of their tool. I should emphasize all of our tools are completely free for unlimited use. So there's no cost, there are no advertisements. It's all here to serve you, to serve the needs of Jewish studies researchers. So in the Nakdan Pro, which gives us the advanced options, I can choose rabbinic text rabbani over here. So here we can instruct the computer to vocalize it according to the norms of rabbinic Hebrew. And now if I take that same text and I put it in, what I have now is an almost perfect vocalization. Umeshani, so it sees the Aramaic word, Ashmi'inan, Afal Piken, Ena Mishkav Shalom, Metame, and Ochlin Umashkin. So now it gets Ochlin Umashkin because it's familiar with rabbinic norms for those words. V'lo Adam V'gadim, V'tam Adavar Mishum, and so on. V'have, again another Aramaic word, Kisheni Letuma, and so on. It has words like Machmirinan, which are Aramaic. So basically, and this should probably be Shigitma instead of Yitama, but essentially, what we have here is a model that's made specifically for scholars working with rabbinic texts. So this neural network model that you have once you select the text rabbini option is a model that is programmed with the full conjugation charts for all of Aramaic, for all Aramaic nouns and all Aramaic verbs, and also rabbinic norms like the nun mem switch that we saw, also allowing for prefixes like aleph, daled, and kuf to be attached to Hebrew words, because that's how the rabbinic writers, the halachic writers often wrote. They would use a daled instead of a shin, even though they're talking about Hebrew, and that's what this system allows you to do. Yeah. By the way, another thing I specifically put in because I saw that I needed in my own research is that if you have editorial sigla in your text, so let's say I have a question mark here and a parentheses here, the Nakdan handles it perfectly, because the idea is that this is a tool that's made for scholars, and we expect the text to be full of markup like that. If you're putting in vocalization into a critical edition of a text, and it's made to handle that. Okay, and there are a number of advanced options which I'm not going to get into now, but I'll just under the advanced options, which are all explained in the help file, you can do things like choose to receive a kamatz katan symbol that's differentiated from a regular kamatz. You can choose to vocalize the word ma, mem, hey, either always with a kamatz according to the norms of modern Hebrew, or with a patach and a degation the next word according to traditional Hebrew norms, and many other options of that nature to allow you to hone in on the specific flavor of vocalization that you would want to use in your text. Okay. Sasha asked a good question. What happened with tochna? Okay, yeah. So let's go back there. I should have explained that. Okay, I wrote Rachashti et tochna. Now tochna, yeah. Okay, tochna is well. Here, let me take it out of the. Okay, so let's say when I'm writing the word tochna without vowels, so I'm going to write it like this with a vav. But the vocalization for the word is with a kamatz katan on the taf. So the vav doesn't belong in a vocalized text. The vav is a matrix lectionis. So what we do in these cases, a word like tochna, or a word like tzipor, bird, or a word like miyuchad, what we do is we leave the letter that you're typing, the vav or yud that you're typing, we leave it in because that's part of your input text, but we gray it out because it's not supposed to be there as part of a normalized vocalized text. And then when you copy, when you click the button to copy your vocalized text, and you paste it into your Word document or whatever, you'll receive it vocalized without the matrix lectionis. Now, you may not want that. You may have a different preference, and what I've shown here is the default in what we call the Nakdan Live, which is the simple every person version. But in the Nakdan Pro, in the advanced version that I showed you over here, you have full control. So when I type here words like tochna or tzipor or miyuchad, and I put in nikud, so what happens here by default is it just removes the matrix lectionis, but you have a button on the bottom to show them, so you can decide whether you want to see them or not. And then when you copy the text, you have a little arrow on the side where you can decide whether you want to copy the text with the with the mode kriya, with the matrix lectionis, or not. And depending on whether you check this, you'll get the words with the vavs and yuds or without them. So I think this provides the flexibility needed by scholars. Again, this is something that is similar to what I mentioned before about the editorial sigla and this option here. These are things that that I had experienced previously with other websites that offered this type of service where they always removed the matrix lectionis, or they never would support editorial sigla. And I found that as a scholar, those are things I need. My text has question marks in the middle. There's nothing I can do about it. And similarly, even though a normalized modern Hebrew text that's being published will have those matrix lectionis all removed from the text because that's the standard. It wouldn't look right without it. When I'm preparing a critical edition as a scholar, I need those because if the vav is in the manuscript, I can't just remove the vav. And that's why over here we made sure to provide the option for you to keep it in. That's if you're doing the sort of work where you want to keep the extra vavs and yuds in the text. So thank you, Sasha, for that question. I hope that answers the question. Is there any follow-up about that, or? Okay. Let's see. Someone asked, would it be possible to compare with corpus other than Sfaria? Okay. Good question. Right. So that's about the parallels tool, the first one I showed, where I said it's comparing it to everything in Sfaria, and the question here is whether we can compare it to another corpus. And the answer is we would be happy to compare it to any corpus that you have, but offline, because we don't have the rights to put other corpora up on our site. If we did, we would do it in an instant. And I should correct what I said. When I said it's comparing to Sfaria, the truth is there is a second corpus that's up there, the corpus of the Ben Yehuda project, which includes many modern Hebrew texts from Bialik and Brenner and so on, and that's also there because that's a public domain corpus, and we put it up too because the algorithm can support billions of words. So we're happy to put up any corpus that's in the public domain. We're happy to add it to the site. And if you have corpora that are not in the public domain that you wish to run, we're happy to do it offline for you. So if you send us the corpus you want to compare to and your input text, then we will run it offline on our servers and send you the full results. Okay. Now, okay. Let's see. Okay, someone asked about languages other than Hebrew Yiddish. Well, it's an interesting question. Well, as a general rule at Dicta, we dedicate our resources to Hebrew specifically. That's where we've focused our attention, and that's where our tools are. That's what our tools are focused upon. It happens to be that with the parallels, that first tool I showed you with the parallels, when I first published the algorithm in 2016, I received a few calls from professors at MIT and other places who were studying Arabic corpora, corpora of historical Arabic texts, and they asked if the algorithm could be ported, and I did in fact port the algorithm at that point at their request. I ported the algorithm to support any language once I was doing it for Arabic, and I published that separately in a couple of papers about the Shamila Arabic corpus. So yes, the answer is that the algorithm can theoretically support any language, but the tools on our site are specifically geared towards Hebrew. So if you had a corpus in another language, we'd be happy to run it offline. in terms of straight Aramaic, so yeah, we can handle straight Aramaic because we have the full. Okay, so Sasha asked about whether we can handle straight Aramaic, and the answer is yeah, that because we have the full, because we've programmed it with the full conjugation tables of Aramaic, the program has the ability to do a morphological analysis of the sentence. It's the way it figures out which words, the way it figures out how to disambiguate the words is by doing a morphological parse of the sentence to figure out a sequence of parts of speech that make sense, and to take cues from from plural and singular, masculine and feminine, and so on, in order to choose the right words or to narrow down the correct words. And we have that information for Aramaic, so we can do it. And in fact, we have done it for the entire Talmud Bavli. So we've used our algorithm. We've run our algorithm on the entire Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, and vocalized it. And then there we actually, because it's such a foundational text, we actually had one of our linguistic experts go over it and correct it to make sure that it's really 100%. And we've made that vocalization of the Babylonian Talmud available in the public domain. So anyone who would like that, for this, you can type into Google. If you go to our GitHub, so if you were to type in GitHub Dicta Talmud, these three words, you'll get to our GitHub, and on our GitHub you'll see directories for each Masechah. We're finishing it. It'll be finished in a couple of months, but right now you have here most of the Babylonian Talmud, and if you go into any of these directories, you have a text file to download with the full vocalized text of that tractate. And this is, we're happy to provide this to the world for anyone who wants to take vocalized passages of the Talmud, to put them onto a source sheet, to put them onto a PowerPoint, to reprint them as part of a book, or to use them as part of a big data experiment, of some sort of stylistics experiments on the Talmud and so on. It's all right here for you. Okay, another question: is it possible to integrate individual features into other databases? Okay, so in terms of the specific question, I'm happy to talk. Is the specific use case? I'm happy to talk offline about the Bima database. In general, where we have an API for the Nakdan, about half of our products have an API which can be integrated into other systems. So if you're interested in that type of integration, contact me afterward. Okay, okay, two more things before we finish, and I think we'll stop at that. Okay, I showed you how to vocalize a text over here, and in this little window, and in this, this window really is made, and what I call the Nakdan Pro, it's made for texts of a couple of thousand words, and it provides a very slick interface for fixing the text. So you can review it by moving the arrow keys. So if you move the arrow key right and left, the cursor moves, and then if you say I'm on a dumb, and if I move the arrow key down, then I get the other options for vocalizing that word. So that allows review and correction of the vocalization. And the use case is you have a paragraph or a set of paragraphs that you want to vocalize. You put them in, receive the vocalization, then you review it with the arrow keys, and then at the end you choose copy and paste it wherever you wish. But this is for when you're working closely with the text. You have a relatively small text, and you're and the idea is that the user is planning to use the interface to review every word and correct it as necessary and move on. But sometimes as researchers, we don't want to focus in on a small text, but we want to take a huge corpus and we want to prepare it for a big data analysis. Like, say, we wanted to put it into a site like Stylo, or one of these sites where you put in you upload a corpus and then it gives you an analysis of a word cloud and a timeline of the words and so on. I don't know if you're familiar with these sites. This isn't the place to start introducing them, but anyone who's part of the distant reading direction in research, where large corpora are analyzed in terms of graphs and trees and other computational methods in order to arrive at conclusions for a corpus that would be too large to examine by hand. For that sort of analysis, the disambiguation provided by the Nikud is critical, because otherwise every ayin mem will be cataloged the same whether it's im or am, and every aleph taf will be the same whether it's ed or at. So the vocalization can be seen not as an end in itself here, but as a pre-processing stage for a distant reading analysis. And we have a site that does just that. So our site morphanalysis.dicta.org.il, also on our website, this allows you to upload a file of any size. So you can upload a file of 100,000 words. I'll just demo it here with the same passage that we were seeing, which is rabbinic text and morphological analysis. And what this does is it does give me the full vocalization for every word, but it also gives me a lot more. It gives me the full morphological analysis. So as we see here, say mikoach tumata. So mikoach, right? Mi is a preposition, and koach is a noun. Then tumata, it tells me, is a noun. And going across, we see that it's a noun with a possessive pronoun as a suffix, which is feminine singular third person. And then we see that the afalpi dividrasha hakodemet machmerinan. So notice it on dividrasha. See, this is a hard one. You're not going to. I don't think there's another tool in the world that can do this. Frankly, maybe there is. Let me know if there is. But there are tools that can break off prefixes. But this is such a rabbinic usage. The div, right? So, and that's what the tool does here. It says it breaks off the daled bet as a prefix and indicates that it's a combination of a preposition and a relativizer, right? Because the daled is a relativizer here, and the bi is a preposition, and then it tells you that the main word is a feminine singular noun. And you can put in a text of any size, as I mentioned, and then you can download this. There's a download button here, and then you'll receive the whole thing in a text file, as a tab-separated text file, which you can then plug in to any of those stylistic sites or computational analysis sites, or any scripts that you might want to write on your own in Python. The point is, when you receive your output text here, you'll have the entire text tagged and disambiguated, both with morphology and with vocalization, so that you can run very specific stylistic experiments on it. Okay, yeah. Now, Thomas asked about uploading about a pipeline. That's a good question. We've just that's something we're working on right now. It's not available yet, but just yesterday I was working with my staff on designing the pipeline architecture where a single text could be run through all of the tools, and then you would receive the aligned input of all of them all together. So that's coming up. And the last thing I'm going to show you is the site we call Wordplay, which is a cute little site, but very useful, and I think something that doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's just kind of a byproduct of all the work we did with vocalization. In order to build that vocalization site, as I mentioned, we had to build a word list of the entire Hebrew language, all the possible words and the parts of speech of every word and so on. And then we said, you know what, since we built this list, let's let people query the list directly, because there's never been any way to research the language like that. If you're researching Hebrew language and you want to find words that fit a certain pattern or a certain morphology, where would you go to do that? Right, and there's the few sites that offer this, offered in a very, very partial form, and we decided to expose it in a flexible interface. So the way it works here, so this site, I should say, is mainly, the main part of this site is made for writers. So it provides, it has here charuzim, so it provides rhyme words or alliterative words or words that have consonants with a specific word. But the last tab, Tavnit Milah here, that's the one for researchers. That's the one for people like us. So I'll just demonstrate this, and you'll get a sense of the power, I think, just from the single example that I'll show you here. If you choose Yivu Milah, which is to import a word, so you can type any word in here, and I'm going to type in the word Horaot, which is instructions. Okay, so it gives me the choice of vocalized words, so I'm going to take the Horaot vocalized form, and I'm going to use this word. Now, what it did is it put it into this, it automatically gave me a pattern here. So it said, the pattern is taking out the words, but leaving the mechus like the onus, leaving the vowels. The pattern is a letter with no vocalization, followed by a cholam, followed by a letter with a kamatz, followed by a letter with no vocalization, followed by a kamatz, and followed by a letter with nothing. At the end, let's put a taf in there. And what I can do now is I can ask the system for all other words in the Hebrew language that follow that pattern. So if I choose chipus, now I got otzarot, goralot, hovalot, hodaot, and so on. So I have all the words in the Hebrew language that fit that precise vocalization pattern. Not only do we give you the list from our word list, but we give it to you in Tanakh. So you right away see how those forms are used in the Bible. And so what we have here is a list of verses in the Bible which use forms that fit that pattern. Now, what I can do after this is I can take it further and I can constrict it by morphology, because as I mentioned, we have the morphology in our word list. So, we have these words, and these words all look normal, right? Otzarot, goralot, hovalot, hodaot. That's a standard pattern, and the ot, as we all know, is a feminine, is generally a feminine ending. But let's say we want to ask, well, does it ever occur in the masculine? So if I choose masculine, then it tells me, well, there are 7 cases where that ot ending, where that pattern is used with a masculine word, which happens sometimes in the Hebrew language, that even though a word is masculine, it conjugates in the plural with an ot rather than an im. And we get that list of words right here, otzarot, goralot, and so on, olamot, meaning world. So that's the power of this tool, where I can start with any word. I can fine tune the exact vocalization pattern that I'm looking for here, and then I can filter by specific morphology features, like the suffix, like the part of speech, like the tense, and so on. I can even filter by by hatama, by the accentuation, if it's a mila ra or mila el word, and then I can search for that, and then I can query the word list for words that fit that specific pattern. Okay, so and like I said, this is just a byproduct. This isn't this wasn't our main goal. This wasn't part of approximate matching, and it wasn't part of disambiguating. But once we built up that database of words, we wanted to provide the power of querying that words to anyone who's researching the Hebrew language or who's teaching the Hebrew language and is looking for examples, or anyone who's curious about the language. And we took the opportunity to make a tool for that as well. Okay, let me just see if there are any more questions. So it could be useful for working out a poorly legible word in a manuscript. Yes, exactly. I've used it. That's exactly the type of thing I have used it for, not only for medieval manuscripts, but for manuscripts of Shai Agnon as well, because Agnon's handwriting is famously is absolutely notorious. And yeah, if you have a number of letters and you have a sense of what pattern the word should follow, this can really help narrowing it down. Thank you. And Thomas mentioned tool that detects poetic passages, looking for rhyme meter. Huh. Okay, that's yeah. Okay, Thomas, we should talk more afterward about exactly what you have in mind. But I think there's definitely a lot more to do in terms of language disambiguation and processing when it comes to poetry, and that's something we haven't fully leveraged yet. I should note on the poetic side, we do in the step that we've made towards handling poetry in the Nakdan Pro over here are that in the button for Signon text, for choosing the type of text, if you choose text shira, if you choose poetry, then what happens is the Nakdan allows a whole set of forms that we know to be valid in medieval Hebrew poetry, but which are not valid in modern Hebrew or rabbinic Hebrew. And examples would be the use of a kaf preposition on a past tense verb. So Paitanim would say ki hikshiv, as in the poem El Kashav, El Kashav Sichi, one of the Pesach poems by Elazar Kalir, where ki kashav means when he listened. So in modern Hebrew, it would be kishe kashav, but the Paitanim would drop the shin. And that's something that we wouldn't allow in our modern Nakdan because it's not valid, but in medieval, in poetry it is. And there's a whole host of things like that that are only, that are within the poetic license of the Paitanim. And if you choose the piyut mode, the poetic mode, you'll receive a vocalization that takes that into account. It also takes into account that every f'al can be f'ol and so on. Like the Paitanim will say yimchol, like in the Havdalah, chatotinu hu yimchol, whereas in modern Hebrew the word is yimchal, and yimchol would be an invalid word. So we have taken strides to allow specific poetic forms, if you choose the poetic mode. But I think what Thomas is referring to in his comment about rhyme and meter is something that definitely is on our to-do list for the future. To for instance, given if we know a text is a poetic text, then we can make assumptions about the text based on knowledge that there will be a rhyme scheme and so on. And that's something that we haven't yet built into the system. Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you very much, Avi. this for your tour de force and cornucopia. I have given permissions for everybody to turn on video and or sound, so you can also ask your questions directly and not only via chat. So you please go forward and just ask your questions now orally. Well, then let me ask a question. I mean, this is an incredible rich treasure trove you have constructed, which is really unique on this planet, I think, and opens up a huge amount of possibilities for those, as you said, that do not know anything in programming, but are world experts in their domain. And you have nice API possibilities for people that are a little bit more in the domain. What stops you from putting more on GitHub?
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to ask that, Danielle. It's a very there are many sides to the considerations there, but I'll just mention as one of the considerations is that keeping the putting the entire thing on GitHub would require everything being open source from the foundation. I mean, every component, every training corpus, and so on. And what happens is that I mean, I know you've done amazing things with an open source outlook yourself, but one of the things we've seen here in Israel among the various institutions working on Hebrew NLP is that the ones that choosing open source is very limiting, because all the corpora have to be the training corpora have to be public domain corpora, and the components have to all be public domain or written in-house. And the way we've constructed it, we can leverage commercial components, which we've purchased for use on our website, and we can leverage corpora, which we've been given permission to use by publishers, but not to. We've been given permission to use it for training, but not for distribution. And we can give our users the benefit of all of those components and corpora. And we've had to. It was hard to choose a balance when we first started out. Our open source was one of the principles that we set out for ourselves in the beginning, and then we saw we had to make a decision as to whether to give more value to users, to end users, or to restrict ourselves and go with the open source route. And we decided to go with the more value for the users, because that's our main goal. Our main goal was to reach the professors, to reach the scholars that don't know how to use a GitHub, but who want the maximal value and the maximal performance and maximal quality out of the tool.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Actually, I would like to ask a question, if possible. Avi, thank you for this presentation. It was great as a presentation, and obviously great tool. My question is about incorrect wording. If the Nagdan, for example, or finding the parallel text, I assume that the program assumes full correctness of the text, right? So it's 100% correct. When we take substandard text, from epitaphs, for example. It's a lot of grammatical mistakes and many other issues. What happens if I enter those texts into your tools? How close I will get to any significant results of this?
Oh, excellent question. Yeah. Well, I guess there are two types of substandard text. One is, at first I thought you were asking about texts that have errors in them in terms of like a text that emerges from an OCR or an HTR output, which would just be full of incorrectly interpreted letters. That's one type. And then the other type, which I think you referred to at the end, is a text that where the letters are all correct in terms of what the text says, but the grammar of the writer of that text was not a correct grammar. And then we have formulations which don't fit the expected sequences of parts of speech. So the second case is much easier. The second case of substandard grammar is something that we've taken into account. And as we know that the large body of halachic literature, especially in the post-medieval period, is full of all sorts of grammatical errors. Just as an example, the aleph prefix, which according to the kuf prefix, the Aramaic prefix, which can only be applied to a participle in Aramaic, the later Achronim start putting it on past tense and future tense, and they put it all over the place. And we built the system from the bottom up with the full corpus of ending the screen sharing. Yeah. Thank you. So we built the corpus from the bottom up with the system from the bottom up with the idea that it should support every type of construct, language construct that we have in the full body of Jewish literature. So when we built our word tables, we were constantly checking not just how words should be conjugated according to the Babylonian Aramaic grammars and so on, but we were also checking how they are practically conjugated in the corpora of legal writings. And at any time the writers veered from the valid Aramaic, we added support for that as well. And we did that across the board. And similarly, when we trained our neural network, we fed it with plenty of Jewish legal writings from Europe and America from the later periods where the Hebrew knowledge wasn't really adequate. And so the neural network has seen plenty of instances of what we call the Sachronish Hebrew. And so I think it can handle it quite well. On the other hand, if we're talking about substandard text in terms of typos, in terms of errors that were induced by poor OCR or something like that, then that would fail because the Nakdan, the vocalization, looks at the letters and finds a relevant vocalization for those letters. Now, if the letter is wrong, if you have a tet instead of a bet, it's going to be a different word. We don't have a system to correct and restore the bet. The parallels that I showed you earlier can handle it pretty well. If there's an error one in 5 words, because as I mentioned, it's an approximate matching search algorithm. So if you have errors 1 in 10 words, even 1 in 5 words, the algorithm will easily pass over those words and connect the rest of the words and figure out where the parallels are. But if you have an error in every second word or every third word, it won't succeed. So I hope that answers the question, Marcy.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Thank you very much.
Okay. Someone asked the synopsis tool. Okay. Yeah, synopsis. Thank you for the compliment. So Andrea asked about using synopsis for larger corpora. So right now, the synopsis tool on our site actually does. Well, it's supposed to handle. I designed it to handle large text. I designed it to handle texts of 300,000 words each. And in fact, one of the first things we did with the synopsis tool is to run a synopsis of the multiple versions of the Tosefta in a project that we did with Chaim Lapin and Daniel Stockel. And the Tosefta is over 300,000 words. And we ran that entire thing through the algorithm in one go. It's possible that the website has a timeout that gets in the way. So if you're encountering a timeout in the website, and it if you put in a large file and it gives you an error on it, please write us and we'll be happy to adjust that. We'll be happy to adjust the timeout because it's. I guess I should say, the immediate solution is just as I've mentioned before, then feel free to send the files over and we'll run them offline and send them back to you. And in terms of the website, it's not we can't put it we can't put in a fix instantly because it has to go through our QA process and so on. But certainly, if we hear from our users that the site is not handling the files of the size that you're submitting, then we will schedule a task to fix that. Yeah, and Andrea, specifically, if you've found that text you've submitted did not complete, please let me know so I can pass that on to the front end team and ask them to enlarge the timeout there.
Thank you very much, Avi. I should add, as I did in the chat, that I used it for Yiddish, and that may have had an impact. But I have to say, it was actually tremendous. For the output that we got was amazing. So thank you, and I will be in touch.
Oh, wonderful! Good to hear. Thank you.
So thank you very, very much, Avi, for this brilliant start. It's now 11:30 on my watch here in France. It's another in your time and another one yet in Andreas and Francois' office. We have a Wonder Me room to continue chat for those who would like to have a virtual cup of coffee. So please, on the link that I put up further, I can put it here. Oops, François. And after this marvelous opening of Avi of the Digital Jour Fixe, we can invite you to the next session on February 25. A lot of you already signed up. Please don't hesitate to reverse it, where we go from where you already have a text to the step before that, where you want to get the text from images of either printed, inscribed, or completely manuscript, handwritten works. So many, many thanks to everybody. I will now close this Zoom and invite everybody to have a chat over at the Wonder Me who want to remain there, and especially again thank Avi, who gave a wonderful talk today and who has provided all of us with a toolbox that is just magic.
Thank you. Bravo.